Hello, this is Kelly Hamon, and welcome to the Resiliency Coach podcast. This podcast showcases people who have faced difficult times and how they got through it. These experiences are real and sometimes raw. The people who share their stories are here to tell you you're not alone in your struggle. They share the tools and resources they use in healing. If you're looking for solutions for getting through tough times, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. So today I'm interviewing my friend, Amy Cathey. Amy has overcome self-hatred, anxiety, depression, emotional and sexual abuse, and healed from the trauma caused by living with an abusive partner. Among her greatest achievements are raising 3 children to become strong, contributing adults. So, Amy, thank you so much for being my guest and sharing your story with us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Kelly, and I'm so happy and excited about what you're doing with this podcast. And I have a story too, like everyone out there. And my story begins as a child. It's actually a story about being bullied. We didn't call it back then. And but I was really severely mistreated, and I was able to overcome that, which laid a foundation for the rest of my life. So there was a realization when I was in elementary school, 5th or 6th grade, that I was not the most popular person. We went outside for recess and we played a game of kickball, and I was the very last one chosen to be on any of the teams. And that just made me feel really bad. And I didn't know why that was, probably because I wasn't very athletic. And then also in elementary school, when we had a gym class, I was tall. And so when there were more girls than boys, I got to be the boy. So I never got to be the girl partner, and that impacted me, as crazy as that sounds, but it did. And then I was in a family who were very conservative, and for religious reasons and modesty reasons, we had to wear long skirts. Like the thing that we talked about was you kneel on the floor and the skirt is supposed to, brush the floor, when the skirts back then were rising to mid-thigh, say. They weren't even like the mini skirts. And then I wore hand-me-downs. I was in a family with 9 children, so I wore hand-me-downs. I wasn't allowed to wear makeup till I was 12, and I think my friends at church were wearing makeup when they were 10 years old, and I had to wait till I was 12, and I couldn't wear nylons till I was 12, and we weren't allowed to pierce our ears. So from the time I was 12 years old, I wanted my ears pierced, and I can happily say today they are pierced, and that's another story. But I did eventually get them pierced, and didn't feel like that was any kind of great sin. Anyway, it was hard to ride the bus to school. Fast forward to 7th, 8th grade. We were bused about 20 minutes out, and I couldn't find a place on the bus where people would let me sit with them. And I remember this one day after school coming home, this girl got off the bus, and this boy leaned his head out the window and spit right on top of her head. And I have always felt like that was me. I always felt like that was done to me. And then later on in life, I learned, about being empathic. So some of these things maybe had a really dramatic effect on me because I am so, because I feel things that other people go through. But that thing, I felt like that was how they were treating me, is how they treated this girl. But it actually never happened to me. And, but I did get pushed out. I remember somebody pushing their feet against my hips and trying to push me off the seat, at which I'd fall into the floor. And they just were mean people. And then you would expect you go to church and people would be nice to you there at church. And there was a couple of girls at church that nicknamed me Momo the Monster. And back then where I lived, there was, I guess there was a ride at Six Flags called Momo. But they just thought it was the funniest thing to call me Momo the Monster. And as a young girl, I could not understand what it was about me that people didn't like. Because I saw myself as trying to be Christ-like and trying to be kind to people and sticking up for people, and they didn't like me. And to this day, I really don't know why people didn't like me, other than, I don't know, maybe I didn't know how to socialize. Maybe I didn't have social skills. But that changed. That changed at some point. I remember being a teenager, probably 7th or 8th grade, and I was in my bedroom one night just sobbing because the kids had been so mean to me at school. Just sobbing, and I was banging my head against the wall and pulling my hair, kind of trying to cause physical pain because my heart hurt so much from what people had done. And I wanted to kill myself. I wanted to end my life because it was so painful. And my parents didn't understand what I went through. But here I was, this good person, and I couldn't kill myself because that was a sin to commit suicide. So I made it through that. I remember begging my parents, begging them to send me to another school, and they wouldn't. And I'm sure it was a practicality that, with 9 kids, you just put them on the bus and send them to school. But that was really, really tough. And like the boys didn't like me, but girls were starting to like boys, and that kind of thing went on. But then when I turned 14, once a year they'd have a youth conference where I live, and I would go to the youth conference. And one of the speakers I ran into, they would have these inspirational speakers come. And I remember attending this youth conference, and she met me going out the door, I guess, and she said she perceived that I was someone special. And she told me that I would do great things. And it was so astonishing to me that someone would say that to me after all I'd been through. So what I did, which became a pattern for my life, was that I started studying about and learning about what it meant to be popular. And I started learning how to do makeup. And I learned how to do my hair. My mother wasn't teaching me that. It wasn't important to her. But I would look in the magazines, and I started working when I was 12 years old, babysitting to earn money, just so I could buy some nice clothes rather than wear hand-me-downs. And so I was on this journey to try to fix my outsides and my insides. And what I did was, besides looking at the magazines, learning how to do hair and makeup and earning money, was that I read 2 books that had a great impact on my life. One is called The World's Greatest Salesman by Og Mandino. And in that book, I've learned how to not criticize, condemn, or complain, the 3 C's. And that's something I remember from that book. And so I started to practice that. Sorry, that's not from The World's Greatest Salesman. That's from the other book I read, How to Win Friends and Influence People. From The World's Greatest Salesman, I learned to wake up every morning and greet the day with a smile and a good attitude. So those were some things I did. When I was 12, I begged my parents to give me braces, and they would fight me. They're like, your teeth are fine, your teeth are fine. But as it turned out, I had a crossbite and really needed those braces. And it was actually one of the greatest emotional things my parents ever did for me, was to pay for braces. And then when I was older, maybe 16 or 17, and still earning money, I had a job by then, I pled with them to let me use my money for contacts. And they were practical again. And my father said, well, your brother tried to wear contacts and it didn't work for him. you're not going to like them. But I bought them anyway, and I ended up wearing contacts for about 20 years of my life until I couldn't wear them anymore. But those are some things that I did to beautify myself. And I realized after having gone through all this that is my MO. That's how I do life. If I have a problem, or if I'm in a relationship that is rough, I start studying and learning and trying to figure out what's going on, what it is I'm dealing with, and what is the solution. So when I did that, back then, I would say that was my first really memorable experience of learning how to manifest, or in other words, I call it activating faith. Faith is actually an action word. And it's my first experience that I really applied the law of having the law that you need to know what you want in order to get what you want. So I knew I wanted to become popular, and I wanted to know what that felt like to be well liked. And I wanted to know what it felt like to be beautiful. And so I read and studied, and my desire was to go to college, a church college that was out of state, and to have a lot of different dates. Not back then, it wasn't sleeping with people. Back then it was you actually went on dates and had fun. So my goal was to be popular in that way and have a lot of guys ask me out. And again, my father said to me, well, your sister went out there to college and she didn't have a lot of dates, and so you probably won't have a lot of dates, kind of thing. He didn't say it exactly like that. And I had a really good close friend that said, Amy, you are not your sister. And I'm like, okay. So what happened to me and what my life experience was is I went out to college and became very popular. I had probably 3 or 4 dates a weekend, starting Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, going to a church devotional, going to a dance, going to a poetry reading. There was just a lot of guys that I met, and a lot of them were not interested in serious relationships. They just wanted to have fun. So I went out to college and became, I would call it, very popular. And I got so good at dating that, let's see, I dropped out of college after about 2 years, so 20, 21 years old. And I was involved with a singles group. And I felt like in that singles group, I felt like I could write a book on dating. That's how good I had gotten at dating and getting guys to ask me out. I didn't ask guys out. We didn't do that back then. And I wasn't the kind of girl that would go to a dance that the guys would ask to dance. I was more of the wallflower type. But if a guy got to know me, I had worked on my personality so much that if a guy got to know me, then he would want to take me out. So I was like, by the time I was about 20 years old, I thought I could write a book on it. And I remember in the singles group that I was in that there were 3 new guys that had just come to go to college. And I said, I'm going to get each of them to ask me out. And I started doing that, and I was able to, probably the best looking guy in the whole group asked me on a date. And I'll tell you what, it was the worst date ever. It was like my very worst date I ever had. But he did ask me out. And then I never made it through all 3 of those guys because another guy asked me out and I ended up marrying him. But that's another story. So I felt like, looking back on that laid the whole foundation for my life. But one of the things, that impact of that being ugly, my whole entire life, I've looked in the mirror and saw myself as ugly. So it took some therapy. I went to counselors for other reasons and from time to time over the years. And one of the things the counselor said to me is that, can you say some people find me attractive? And so I learned to say that some people find me attractive. And that has turned out to be true. And then years ago ran into the teachings and the influence of Louise Hay, who has a book called You Can Heal Your Life. And Louise Hay taught me about an affirmation where you look yourself in the eye in the mirror and you say to yourself, I love you. I really, really love you. And I have worked that affirmation, and it is powerful. And then I want to say this about affirmations. When I first heard about them years and years ago, I would say them and they just sounded like lies to me. And I just couldn't say them because I'm like, this is such a lie. And I didn't understand the power of the word, and I didn't understand the power of manifesting when I first started. But with Louise Hay and her book, You Can Heal Your Life, she has a whole bunch of affirmations to help with probable causes for illness. But this one, this mirror exercise, looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, I really, really love you, is super powerful. And that brings to mind another experience I had. I found myself single about 6 or 7 years ago. And I was really worried about getting out and dating. I'm now married, I'm now remarried, but I was worried about getting out and dating and worried that being so old that nobody would find me attractive. So this kind of thing came up again as not feeling beautiful and maybe not being attractive. But I put the affirmations to work, and I look in the mirror and tell myself how beautiful I was. And there was this period of about 4 months, and actually in that 4-month period, I met my current husband. But in that period of 4 months, I was told that I was beautiful. That word beautiful was used more times in that 4-month period than any of the rest of my whole entire life. I heard it more than I ever had my whole entire life. And I attribute that to the power of the energy work that I do, the power of thought, the power of affirmations. What I was saying to myself and affirming in the mirror is what other people would pick up on from my energy body, and they would say to me. It was just an astounding time for me to have gone from being the ugly duckling to a person in her 50s who others found beautiful and would say that. So that really is the crux of my story, is that it was a painful time to go through that. But had I not gone through that, I would not have learned how to do makeup. And I was a makeup consultant at one time. I was a wardrobe consultant at one time. I would not have developed social skills. And I have this saying, know yourself, do yourself, forget yourself. And by that, know yourself, take care of yourself, look pretty, do your makeup, do your hair, do your clothes, and then forget about it and go on and live life. So I developed that philosophy, and I learned about affirmations, and I learned that some people find me attractive, and am I a model? Am I a 10? No, but that doesn't even matter in my life. What matters in my life is that the people who I'm around, that they love me and that they care about me. And I have had, because I worked so hard to develop my personality, I have had the pleasure of people telling me what a very unusual and inspirational person I am. But I came from those roots of being bullied and not being well liked. And it grew, it challenged me, and I took it and I did something with it. I did not let that define me. I didn't want to be ugly, and I worked hard to not be ugly, and then got to a point where people would call me beautiful. It's kind of a Cinderella story, but I'm not a Barbie doll type. I'm just me and happy with who I am. But it's taken a lot of experience and many, many hours of counseling, a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of practice to get where I am today. And I can honestly say that I really love the person that I am.
That's awesome. So there's a couple of things I heard, that you use books, you use therapists, you use affirmations. The thing that I'm taking away from this is something I knew, but I don't know everybody knows this, is that bullying can last a lifetime. And it's those echoing voices in your head that are the negative voices of yourself, because you believed the bullies to begin with. You believe what they were saying. And then as an adult, you still continue to play that recording of those voices. And so if somebody says, oh, they're just getting bullied, or it's no big deal, it's just a bully, it is a big deal, because these people affect these children's lives for the rest of their life. And not everybody, like you, Amy, has the gumption or ability to be able to come out of that. And the question I have for you is, how did you have that strong will to come out of it? Believe that there was something beyond the self-hatred, something that was beyond what the echoing voices were telling you. What made you believe that there was something beyond to continually search for that?
Well, it was my religious teaching, actually. And as tough as it was to be with parents who were very strict in the religion, I always knew that I was a daughter of a loving Heavenly Father. And I heard many, many talks as a child about how special women are, how loved they are by God, how precious they are. And I had to believe that. And there was also a particular blessing that I received when I was 17 from a very inspired person in my church. And in that blessing, I was told that 3 times there, that I was talented and that I had a purpose. And there were things that were said in that blessing that talked to me about my purpose. Not everybody has that, but I do. If I believe that I am a cherished daughter of a loving Heavenly Father, then I am literally His spirit daughter, and a little part of Him runs through me. And His great job is creator, and a little bit of that creation is in me. I didn't know it as a teenager. I didn't know it till much later in life, but we are meant to create. And part of that creation process is learning how to manifest, or learning how to activate that faith, which is His power to create, combined with our power that He's instilled in us, because we are spirit beings of Him. So whether a person believes that or not, that was my belief. And that belief that I was special to God drove me to find my purpose, drove me to understand who I was, and that I had a purpose in life. And I didn't know at the time I was a child, but I know this now, that we always get through things. I've lived enough decades to know you always come out on the other end. And not saying that sometimes, I mean, life will always end at some point with death. But if it doesn't end with death, you come out on the other side of your challenges and your trials. And if we let them, they will either destroy us or make us better. And I just wanted to be a certain kind of person. I wanted to be loved by people. I love people. And that was one thing I couldn't understand, is because I just have this innate love for my fellow man, for other people. But I've learned over the years that just because I love others doesn't mean they're going to love me back. And that still, I try not to let that define me. If somebody doesn't like me, that's on them. If I don't like myself, that's on me. So I need to make choices and create my life experience as much as possible so that I can be proud of my accomplishments, so that I can be proud of who I am and not be ashamed of my own behavior and my own choices. So it was, even though it was challenging growing up in a strict religious home, there are things that I was taught that I really embraced. And, you were talking about people being bullied. We've been talking about that, and that we believe it, and it can affect us our whole life. It affects us if we agree to it. So there's contracts, I've learned. We make these invisible emotional contracts. Oh, you say I'm ugly, lock. Okay, I'm ugly for the rest of my life. So I've done healing work, something called journey work, that is a deep meditative process that releases some of the things that we do to ourselves, like these contracts we make. And back then, and because of how I was raised and how I learned to live through life, I will use the word codependent. I was raised to be a little codependent, unbeknownst to my parents. But that's how we were, that we sacrifice everything we are for everyone else. And then, they can stomp on you, you become a doormat. And I have learned that we can undo those contracts we make. And so being codependent, it was like, okay, your opinion must weigh heavier than mine. Or if you said it, that must be the right opinion. So as a child, and this was also part of being raised in a large family, I didn't have an opinion or a voice that counted. In my home, if it wasn't, it was the older kids, and I was on the younger end of that, they tried to do a vote, but my vote was always outweighed. It was always what the older kids wanted. And so I learned I didn't have a voice. And it's taken me a long time to get my voice, and I still struggle with speaking up for myself, because for so much of my life it was, oh, your opinion matters more than mine, or you make the decision because you're more important than me. And that was modeled to me by my mother. If there was somebody who was in line at the grocery store, even if she had 2 items, oh, you go first, in an effort to be compassionate and to serve others. She never, it never was her turn. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. And if you could give advice there are 2 people I want you to give advice to, maybe even 3. So think about this. If you could give advice to somebody that has a child that's bullying others, or if you could give advice to the bullier, that's one person I'd like you, or 2 people I'd like you to address. The second one would be the child being bullied. And the third would be advice to the parent of the child being bullied.
Wow, that's a lot. I think first and foremost, as a parent, it's our responsibility to help our children know who they are. I think when you know that you're not here just to be mean and just to find out how important you are, that your life has a purpose. I think that's really important, that children have an idea of who they are. And I think even parents don't have an idea of who they are. Figure out who you are and know that you have a life purpose. I was blessed. I will say this. I was blessed with 3 beautiful daughters. And it was my greatest desire to marry somebody who was handsome so I could have beautiful children because of this ugly experience I had. And I was told the whole time they were growing up how gorgeous they were. People would say, oh, they're all 3 beautiful, but this one's the most beautiful. And they're all 3 beautiful, but that one's the most beautiful. So they said it about each one of them. So I learned beauty was in the eye of the beholder. But here's what I taught my own daughters. I taught them that God made you beautiful for a reason. People who are beautiful like that naturally they get in places that ordinary people don't get in. People are attracted to beautiful faces, and you will be places where you will be able to have influence on people. Make sure that influence is for good. God gave you beauty for a reason. And for me, I also have known people who were really beautiful on the outside, like the guy that I dated that was the worst date ever because he couldn't talk. It's sometimes people who are naturally very physically beautiful don't ever develop personalities. So that's been an observation of mine. Sometimes people who are like Barbie and Ken beautiful really have not had to develop their personality because they always have people around them because they're beautiful. So to people, and I would say this to the bulliers, and I would say this to parents who have children who bully or who have been bullied. Help them know who they are. If you don't know who you are, figure out who you are. Help your children know they have value and that they're not defined by other people, but they're defined by their own behavior and their own choices, and to make good choices. There's so many times nowadays parents back their kids up in poor behavior. You can talk to any teacher in any school, and they can talk about this because they're not allowed to discipline in the schools because parents back up the bad behavior of the children. But I think it's because parents don't know who they are, and they don't know who their kids are, and they don't know the potential. I knew by the time I was 17 that I had a great potential because of that blessing that I received. And so I worked my whole life to live to that potential. And then I realized at some point in life that if I am a child of God, then I also have the ability to learn how to create. And then I've learned about manifesting or activating faith. And I've been able to, like I said, create a wonderful life to look at. So I think that probably is a message for everybody here. Figure out who you are, realize you have a purpose, find out what your potential is, or believe that you have a potential, and then act on it. And that every decision you make should lead you toward goals that you set goals. That helps you, that gives you a focus to reach your potential. And also I think children I think there's so much narcissism in our society today that people forget about the empathic side of nature, of themselves, of other people, to learn that your behavior affects other people. A lot nowadays, people don't realize that what you do and what you say, and this is particularly a narcissistic perspective, is if it's good for me, it's good for you. They don't think about how their behavior hurts other people. But what we say and what we do does impact those around us. We're all connected energetically. True fact, scientific fact, that science can see our auras from our bodies extend 17 or 18 feet from our bodies. They have photographed this. So we are literally in each other's space. So we are connected in ways beyond what most people realize. So it's all connectivity, and being self-aware and being aware of others, and emotions are far more important than our parents ever knew. We were taught to suppress emotions way back when. And I actually think I have a strong belief that God created emotions for a reason, positive and negative. They're there for a reason, and they're there as guideposts for us. So people who are selfish, self-centered, they're not really self-reflective. So anyway, that is it. Know who you are and know your potential.
That's great advice. And I would add too that if you know your child is being bullied, do something ASAP. There are laws now in certain states, as well as federal laws, that prohibit and or stop bullying at a legal end, because we've seen some really bad cases where it went to violence. And we want to make sure that we're protecting our children on all ends. So if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, how would they do that, Amy?
They can email me at Amy Cathey, Cathey, 1, the number 1, at gmail.com.
That's great. Thank you, Amy, for sharing your story with us today. Thank you, audience, for listening to Amy. And remember, there is a way through your difficulty. Please seek out resources and people who can and will help you. Now, if you're looking for alternative tools for handling difficult times or moving ahead in life, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. Hope you all have a blessed day and a wonderful life. Goodbye.